Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the Political Brown Kid here, and I want to talk about the Netflix series that was just released, Thursday, Eastern Time? Thursday, midnight Eastern Time? 3 a.m. or midnight West Coast Time, Griselda, starring Sofia Vergara. Um, I don't really have the other players in this show. I think the creators and or directors or and writers, but you can look it up on IMDb. And I just want to kind of have a discussion on this. Um, like I said, I guess I'm in my 40s, so I kind of grew up around this time frame and kind of know the backstory of some of this stuff. So that's why I kind of wanted to do this review. Similar to, I think when they did the story on the individual who helped out Martin Luther King's March on Washington. I did a review on that, and I found some conflict there. Now, with this whole Griselda thing, I want to touch on a few things. It just seems like there was a lot of inaccuracies in this. That's number one. Um, as far as production, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to just talk about the feminism aspect of it as well. So, Sofia Vergara stars in it. She stars as Griselda Blanca. If anyone who doesn't know who Griselda is, Griselda was a drug queenpin back in the 70s, 80s time frame from Colombia and came to Miami where she set up shop. So if anyone doesn't want to hear about this, because I am going to kind of give some spoilers either to the movie and or to real life, you may want to leave now. But the problem that I have is this, and let me start off by saying I've watched all of the Narcos series, and the one thing that I loved about the Narcos series was, one thing that I hate. Let me start with the thing that I did not like, I disliked about the Narcos series was the fact that they did a Narcos and then they did a split off by doing Narcos Mexico. I thought that was so unnecessary. I was just kind of like, why didn't they just keep it as Narcos and they could have kept all of the shows underneath one umbrella, underneath one interface, or one instance of the Narcos show. That way I don't have to keep bookmarking or tagging two different shows. All they had to do was say the first one or two seasons of Narcos is focused on Colombia, I think, or Medellin, and because they focused on that was focused on Medellin, I think season one, season two, then season three of Narcos focused on the Cali cartel, and then when they did Narcos Mexico, then it jumped from Colombia to Mexico, and then that's when they focused on Rafa Quintero and I forgot the other guy's name right now. It slips my mind. Those two are still alive, actually. That's a whole different story, but I'm not even going to touch on that. And then they focused on El Chapo as well, Joaquin Chapo. So with that being said, then they could have just shifted Narcos again and just said, okay, well, season 6 or 7 or whatever they would have been on, now we're jumping to Miami and now we're going to focus on Griselda. And then and then if they wanted to keep continuing it with, I guess, American the narco stories, they could have touched on various cities, whether it be California, whether it be New York. They could have did whatever. They could have continued the narcos underneath one umbrella. That's the big problem that I have. And one of the major problems too that I saw with this whole Griselda thing, because I did not like this Griselda series. I'm gonna start off by saying that is the fact that maybe if it was done by the people of Narco, it would have come off better. It would have been way more authentic because literally, if you were born during that era, when you looked at the Narco series, when you looked at Pablo, he looked somewhat like Pablo. The guy that played El Chapo in Narcos Mexico, he looked somewhat like El Chapo. So you could have seen those patterns. When Sofia Vergara, and I don't know why she was cast for this, maybe because she was the one throwing the money behind it, maybe she was screaming, pick me to play this role. I thought, let's just talk. Now we're diving into Griselda. Well, I just thought that she was just cast wrong. Griselda Blanco looked nothing like her, but my thing is, I got over it. I was like, okay, well, let me just see her role. And I'm gonna say this similar to this was when I watched the Hatfields and McCoys. Now, mind you, I went into Hatfields and McCoys not knowing what Devil Anse Hatfield looked like. So when I saw Kevin Costner playing him, he did a fantastic job. But at the same time, when you start at the end, when you start seeing the real characters, you can say, okay, well, yeah, he looks somewhat like him. But for the most part, it always seemed like superstars always have to play the cool part. I have to be Devil Anse, the one that gets the better of, of the McCoy. I have to be the cool one, as opposed to him playing another character. But I will say this for the Hatfields and McCoys, I'm digressing just slightly, that they did a very good job being authentic, sticking true to real life, true events. Whenever I Google, after every episode, when I Googled stuff, I was like, oh, that really did happen, kind of in that way, shape, fashion, or form. Jumping back to Griselda, and I'm going to stick on Griselda from now. Number one, like I said, casting of Griselda was off. And then they tried to put on this horrible makeup on her face that, like, during the first 3 episodes, I just kept staring at her face. It was like, they didn't even do a good job covering up this makeup that's on her face, or prosthetic, or whatever you want to call it, that's on her face. So I'm pretty sure the makeup artists are not winning any awards for this show. So that's number one. When you look at her being cast as Griselda, to me, it was off, but I think she did a decent job playing the role. When you looked at the guy playing Rivy, and mind you too, going into this, like I said, I grew up during that era. I'm an 80s product. So I grew up kind of seeing this background. Plus, they had already done a show called, Cowboys. So if you go on Amazon Prime right now and Google the drug, I'm not going to say the name. I don't know how that flies with YouTube, but the Cowboys, they give the play-by-play. And then they even did a Cowboys 2, Hustling with the Godmother, that focused on this brother who said that he was with Griselda after she got out, or while she was in prison in LA or whatever, and he hooked up with her, and he explained his time with her. But the first Cowboys show did an excellent job, because they actually talked to Rivy. So they actually had conversation with Rivy in the show. They talked to I guess this guy named John Roberts, and they talked to Mike Mundy. Now, mind you, maybe they didn't know the other details of what was going on, but they kind of gave you a play. So when I'm watching this Griselda and I'm looking at stuff, and then plus once you see the Narcos series, which kind of fits in, you kind of get thrown off by what Griselda was about. So the storylines, and I'm going to punch holes in her storyline in a minute, but let me just stay on the characters and the casting. When you look at the guy that's playing Rivy, he looks nothing like Rivy. The hair is off, and maybe they should have cut his hair and styled it differently to make him look a little more like Rivy. The guy who commits this the stabbing in the airport, he looked nothing like Miguel. I think his name was Miguel or Miguelito, whatever they called him. He looked nothing like him. He looked nothing like that guy at all. And the guy who plays Rafa, the real Rafa, I think they said he was like 5'4", 5'5". He was a shorter guy. The guy looked nothing like Rafa. So these were the things that kind of threw me off, like when I was watching it, because I watch TV. I'm kind of like a TV person, so things like that. When you look at those details, it kind of throws you off. So that's number one. But now I want to talk about the storyline, and then this is also going to kind of go into the feminine induced aspects of the show. And boy, I thought it was just the sisters that was on this hyper feminism stuff, and then I see that it is just all of these women, white, Latino, they're all just kind of hyper feminizing television for the sake of just plugging in feminism. And I don't know what their problem is with men and their hatred towards men is. But we're going to talk about that, but we're going to mix this in with facts of the show. The reason why I had a problem with this show was because, and also too, before I even get into the show, let me go back to just kind of like the production. I've already kind of talked about the casting, but then also the music that they played in this show. It was like it was almost like if you'd watch Eddie Murphy's Beverly Hills Cop 3. You know how he had that stupid, that dumb music because you could tell he couldn't afford. You could tell Beverly Hills Cop 3 didn't have a good budget with it. So, and it was just the dumbest Beverly Hills Cop you could ever watch. It was so B movie-ish. But he had a dumb soundtrack to it because that's probably what he could afford. And I'm assuming the same with Griselda. They kept playing this kind of orchestra type of drama music every time she did something, but it was almost like a laugh track. It was just the same track every time she did something in this show. And they just kept playing this track. I just got tired of listening to it. So that's just another thing. But then the other part about it, when you start looking at the show Griselda, they really didn't have it. Maybe because there was only 6 episodes with this limited series, and maybe that's why Narcos should have done this, and they could have been like 10 episodes, and they could have carried this Griselda story just like they did with Pablo in Narco. They could have carried Griselda's for 2 seasons, and just like they did with Rafa Quintero, they carried his storyline for 2 seasons. Maybe she needed 20 episodes because they jam-packed all of those heinous acts into 6 series. They jam-packed those 6 hours. It wasn't even 6 hours. 6 series, and I think they were like 40 or 50 minutes long each. So those 5+ hours or 4 hours and 50 minutes of whatever they were trying to convey, it just didn't work. It really did not work because they jam-packed everything in. So let me explain this. Number one, like the Dade County massacre or shooting at that store in Dade County shopping mall, or well, I don't know if it was a mall or strip mall, but that was a big event, and they just kind of glossed over that real fast, and they really didn't break that down. And maybe they didn't have the budget for, a truer gunfight, but they just kind of glossed that over. And a lot of the other events just were kind of not true. And I'm going to kind of walk through some of this stuff. But just to kind of get into the feminist part of it is, I had to Google to see if this June Hawthorne was a real person. And she actually was, because I've never heard of her. And maybe that was a flaw in other shows and other documentaries. Point of, omitting her from the stories because they've always talked about it from a DEA agent perspective. So maybe she did point this out, but I think that and I'm not going to question June Hawthorne or where she is, because I think she's now in her 70s, but apparently they're trying to give her credit. They make the men in this show, and this is what I'm talking about, the feminist induced part of it, this feminism part. The feminism, they make these men, the police officer men, seem so incompetent. Nobody figures out that there's this woman that's involved in these killings, but another woman, June Hawthorne. And maybe that is true. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to accept it to be true. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to minimize this woman's role, and I'm not going to validate the movies doing it. I would need to do a little bit more research. But the thing that just concerns me is that they make the other male detectives seem so clueless, and it takes June Hawthorne to come in and say the woman is doing this. And then it's like, okay, the men still don't believe it, and then finally they believe it. Then it's June. All of the other detectives are like, well, June was the one who discovered this. It was the work of June that's bringing this to light. And it's like June is leading this crusade throughout the whole show, this detective, to capture Griselda Blanco. And so that's the kind of concerning. And it's like, really? And even in the end, it's June that comes in, and helps take her back to Miami. And then it's June. You mean to tell me that Griselda was sitting in prison for all of those years and didn't know that not one of her 3 children had died? But now it's this woman, June Hawthorne, coming in before Griselda gets released and letting her know that her 3 children had been murdered. One murdered in Colombia, one murdered in a club. They didn't mention how the 3rd one was murdered. So that kind of threw me. The other thing that threw me too, and I'm just focusing on This is what I'm talking about. The feminist part of it is like early in the beginning, when Griselda meets when she brings the escorts over from her country to America, and she's explaining, she's basically saying, I, as a woman, am going to crack this male-dominated industry and become the biggest kingpin ever. And then this other woman sits there and be like, yeah, she's a badass. Yes, Griselda, you're a badass. And it's kind of like they're just trying to hype this woman up. They're playing off of the woman thing. And I'm not trying to say that the woman thing should not be introduced because, of course, you're talking about, Latinos, and that's been you've heard. I can't speak for sure, but you hear that they're kind of male chauvinists, especially during around that time, and then you also have to look at the powers during that time of being a female in a male dominated. I don't even know if you can call drug dealing in the industry, but for the sake of a better term for right now, she's cracked this industry and she's become one of the top dealers in a quote unquote industry. So I guess, you can't, there's no, I'm not trying to say we needed to avoid talking about it, but they were just kind of hyping it up, but almost to the point where they were trying to glorify that a woman had risen to so much power. Like from the very beginning, the quote that they show, the only man I ever feared was Griselda Blanco. And then I had Blanco, and I had to look to see did Pablo really say that? Did Pablo Escobar really say that? And it's possibly true because I think Pablo was brought into the game by Griselda, I do believe, at some point. You don't have to quote me definitely on that, but I know that they had ties back in Colombia. But they open up with that quote to show you that even a badass like Pablo respects this person. And so then this, like I said, the escort gives her props. You have this other woman, June. All the men are clueless except for June. Towards the end of this movie, you have, what happens, and this is real life story because Rivy talks about this and it's talked about in the Cowboys documentary. I can't say the first word, but it's the drug name and then Cowboys. They didn't talk about it, but they showed how Rivy was involved at a heavy phone, talking lewd conversations with females. You're having phone encounters, kind of like a Girl 6 type phone calls with women. And he was engaged in that with the secretaries that worked for the prosecution. So, and that was in the documentary for the Cowboys. So they touched on that in the television show, in the Griselda series. So June Hawthorne, the detective, she's sitting with a male detective in a bar, and she's like, how does Rivy have these nasty phone conversations with these secretaries? What a typical man, trying to make it. And then it's kind of like, wait, but hold up, what a typical man. And there's always these shots at men. But the thing is that you have to say, well, hold up, Rivy's a criminal. Why aren't you talking about how stupid this woman is who's married? And mind you, in the Cowboys documentary, they said it was secretaries. So they made it seem like it was more than one female that Rivy was doing this with. But in the movie, they showed only one secretary sitting at a desk playing with herself while Rivy was talking to her. So how come she isn't saying how dumb is this woman to be entertaining this criminal while he's locked up behind bars and she's a married woman and she's on the phone entertaining him and having nasty phone conversations because she's bored with her husband? Why isn't she talking about that? But it's always turning back on the men to make the men look bad. Also, throughout this show, they're almost borderline glamorizing Griselda Blanco's bullcrap. They try to make it seem like she was so hurt that when she ordered the hit on her bodyguard, Chucho, I do believe that's his name, when she ordered the hit on her bodyguard and Rivy and them missed but killed his 2-year-old child, they tried to make it seem like in the show she was so distraught and she didn't really want that kid to die. Oh my God. But when you watch the Cowboys documentary, which Rivy talks about it in there, He said that she was hard. She was like, okay, the kid died. Oh well, oh well. They made it, and people backed up the story that she was very heartless in how she moved. She didn't care who got it. And but all throughout the show of Sofia Vergara's character, they're trying to show that she had empathy because she was a mother, and they even talked about that in the documentary. She's a mother, and they try to make her seem so kind of likable, like she had this remorse towards these murders that she was ordering when the wrong people got murdered. That was the other thing that I did not like about the show. They did not show the callousness of a murdering drug dealer. When you watch the Narcos series, they didn't make Pablo Escobar seem like a saint, like, oh, I didn't want all those other people to die. No, they made him seem like the callous murderer that he was. And he was. When Pablo, and also too, let me mention this. In the end of this movie, Griselda, they end it with her going to prison. They don't end it with her getting murdered in Colombia, gunned down on the street. Why not? I guarantee you it was like, no one wants to see a woman get murdered. No one, why not? This woman has been murdered, and she's done murdered over 50 people, approximately. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but she murdered at least 30, 40 people. So why shouldn't we see the justice to show people that this lifestyle is not one that ends with glamour? But they said that they said that I think I've read an article. They said two things in one article. They put the prosthetics on her face to make Sofia Vergara look less attractive. Well, then they should have hired a less attractive actress that looks more like Griselda to play Griselda. But then they also said they didn't want to show those murders, to show Griselda getting murdered. Why not? Show it. That's a part of her story. They showed Pablo getting gunned down on a roof in Narco. Why not show hers? So these are the things I want to say. But now, finally, because I don't want to make this too long, I didn't expect to talk this long, but it's a lot when you start talking about it. But finally, I just want to talk about the inaccuracies of this show. And I guess I'm saving this for last, but I probably should have led with this. But when you look at it, there's so much inaccuracies. Number one, it's just in my head now, so I'm gonna bring it up. When the guy Dario, who had her youngest son, Michael Corleone, took her son back to, I think, Colombia, when he took him away and they went back to Colombia, I think the way the story actually goes, and you all can look this up, was that she went over to Colombia with some hitmen and she got her son back and had him killed. That's what happened. I do believe that's what regardless, she had him murdered. She had the father of her child murdered because he took her because she was leading the wrong life. I don't know about that part of it, but she was over there. The other inaccuracy too was that and a lot of stuff when it comes to your head is just flying off. The way she met, I already talked about Rivy not looking the way he's supposed to look, but they never talked about like Rivy and how she really kind of met Rivy. They made it seem like Rivy was working, I think, for some other drug dealer, and then he just started working for her. No, the way Rivy explains it was that he got brought into it from a different situation. He kind of botched a hit that they were supposed to do in a club, so that she told him that it was his job. She wanted to meet him so that they put the onus on him to fix it. And that's how they linked up. Also, I don't think Rivy went to California. Rivy claims that when they left Miami, he told her, I'm going back to Chicago, where I'm from. I'm not going with you to California. In the movie, they have him going to California and raising her 3 kids. First, he told her that in a prior life, me and you were lovers. So they're basically trying to say that he was in love with her. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But Rivy never gave that impression on the show because he was married to his wife. But he never said that in the thing. He never went to California and helped establish her there in California. Never happened. It did not happen. Also, when Marta Ochoa dies in the show, they made it seem like Marta Ochoa and Griselda was in the house getting high and just hanging out. and then she OD'd and fell through a glass table, and then Rivy was called over to help her clean it up and rolled her up, and then they put her in a sauna in the backyard. No, the way Rivy tells the story, and maybe Rivy's lying. He is a criminal, so he could be lying. But in the Cowboys documentary on Prime, Amazon Prime, or you can Google it and order it on demand from somewhere, look it up. Rivy makes it seem like Griselda said, Griselda wanted Marta gone. So I guess they lured Marta to a certain place. When Marta walked through the door, she saw Griselda and was immediately shook, like, oh my God, because she knew what was about to go down. And she was then unalived at that point in time. And then they dumped her on the side of a road. And they even showed the pictures in the Cowboy documentary of her laying in the woods. So what is it, a hot tub or is it the woods? Also in the documentary, when you watch the Cowboys documentary, the DEA agents, which was a man, he said that when I catch Griselda Blanca, I'm going to give her a kiss on the cheek. He said what happened was she was in a townhouse. I do believe it was a townhouse. He said that she was living in a modest townhouse in California, I believe, because that's where they arrested her. And she was upstairs in her bedroom reading the Bible, in her bed, reading the Bible. And when they walked in the house, she was already sitting in the bed reading the Bible. And that's when he asked her, was she Griselda Blanca? She said no. They said yes, she was. And I guess they figured it was her. And then they slapped the cuffs on her and he kissed her on the cheek, because he finally made the arrest that he's been trying to make for years. The way the show makes it seem like Griselda was so cool and so crafty that she knew that the Ochoa family wanted her gone. So as soon as they found her, she called the police and gave the tip on herself so that the Ochoas couldn't get her, so that the police could get her and put her in protective custody, like she had that smarts with her. And even in the end, when and this is going back to the feminist point, when she's riding in the car with June Hawthorne, the agent, the detective, or whatever she was, the police officer, when she's riding with, when June and Griselda are in the back seat, June Hawthorne leans over and says, "You think you're so smart. You think just because you beat all of these men, and now I bet you mad because you beat all of these men, and it took me to catch you." Basically, like it took a woman to bring down another woman. It took a badass woman to bring down another badass woman, because all of these men are so stupid. That's not the way the story, it's not the way the story goes. We don't get to rewrite history. In television shows, I guess you do. Yeah, you do, but it's not right. It is not right to do these things. It doesn't make sense to do these things. Her life was already, you could have wrote a show on her life alone. So why fictionalize this stuff? I'm just trying to figure out what was the point. Also, the other thing that kind of interests me was the fact that they never talked about, is his name Max Myrtlestein? I think that's his name. I know his first name is Max. I may be wrong on that Myrtlestein. But once again, I think you all should watch the Cowboys documentary. Because, Max Myrtlestein was, I guess, a business guy that had dealings with Griselda and Rafa and all of those individuals. And he was the one who actually flipped. When he got arrested, he was the one who flipped on all of them and kind of got all of them busted. When I say all of them, I mean, he flipped on Griselda, he flipped on Rivy, he flipped on Mike Mundy, he flipped on John Roberts, he flipped on the whole operation. They made it seem like Griselda's, this travel agent friend, after getting choked out by Griselda, was the one who walked into, once again, June Hawthorne. She solved this whole case by herself. She was the one who walked into June's office and was the one who copped the plea deal. I don't know if this individual exists or not. Maybe she does. I don't know, because I haven't done too much background on her. And I haven't done too much background on the other parts that I'm just picking apart the parts that I know of so far. And it's just kind of, when you watch these two, it's just kind of a different contrast. Um, and then they also try to make it seem like in the beginning, like Rivi was the one controlling um, uh, Griselda, and that's what her Griselda's husband Dario kept saying. Like, you keep listening to Rivi, you keep listening to him. Why are you letting this guy control you? Boom, 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 boom. You don't listen to me. And so it made it seem like he was the one calling the shots and pulling Griselda's strings. I guess they're trying to lessen the blow of, just trying to set it up like this woman was groomed. Because, all women love to say that a man has groomed them and made them just the monsters that they are. But it was, but the way you hear the story, she was the boss. She was the boss. People were scared. So I'm just trying to figure out, make your mind up. Is she a super boss that everybody's afraid of and that even Pablo Escobar fears? Or is she being pulled by the strings like a puppet by this guy, Rivi? So I'm just kind of confused by that as well. And that was just another thing too, that just kind of the stories and the stars just don't line up when you watch this movie and this documentary. They're trying to say that this thing has gotten great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's opening up to impressive reviews. People are giving Sofia Vergara, outstanding performance for this role. And I'm not trying to say she didn't do a good job. She did a good job playing the role. It's just that when you look at her and when you look at the real Griselda, kind of like it just doesn't fit. Just like I'm saying, Rivi, his character didn't fit. The guy Miguelito. Matter of fact, too, when the guy Miguelito, he wasn't given a sword to get to harm the guy in the airport. He was given I think it was a bayonet. It was a bayonet that was used. It wasn't a golden sword. So, like I said, these details, when you start changing stuff, it bothers me, especially when you know the kind of like the real story and you've kind of seen the story before. Certain things just don't line up, and it just kind of bothers you when you hear it. But that's all I just wanted to say about this. If anybody has comments, or if you guys want to add in your perspectives on it, if you feel as though I'm wrong, or if you just have some, I know y'all going to say what you're going to say in the comments section. Please drop it in the comments section. And also definitely, provide any additional information that you know of about her story. So once again, this is the Political Brown Kid. Take care.